Thank you.
Well, that concludes our statement. We're going to move on now, if we can, to portfolio questions. And our first portfolio briefing this afternoon is social security and older people. Now, just to remind members, I've grouped questions 1 and 4 together. So we'll hear both the first question and the supplementary, but any other supplementaries will come after question 4. So we'll start right away with question 1 from Tom Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to help older people access essential requirements, including food, medical attention and prescriptions under the current COVID-19.
Minister Christine McKelvey.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. We have made available £15 million of funding to local authorities already at protection level 4 to strengthen their local response and to support the needs of people in their communities who don't have support networks and are struggling with the restrictions or guidance, particularly those most at risk through health or social inequalities. This could include people at higher clinical risk, older people or disabled people who encounter barriers that emerge from, for example, in accessing food and other essential items, as Tom Mason suggests. As before, we can all help by looking out for others. Some people will continue to rely on family, friends and neighbours for help with getting food and essentials, and anyone who needs additional advice, information, support or help can call the free National Assistance Helpline on 0800 111 4000, and that's available from Monday to Friday from 9 AM to 5 PM. This helpline continues to provide a free phone connection to local authorities, which can provide additional support, including access to food, pharmacy services, social services, emotional support and third sector services, or even volunteers, and advice on how to get help for those if they need it. It also can help people who want to safely help others in their community, and that advice is available there on ready.scot. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Back in March last year, over 75s were asked to shield for 4 weeks, which quickly became 8 weeks, then 12, then until the summer, then until Christmas, and now well into the spring. For those living alone, there will be issues with isolation, loneliness, as face-to-face contact is again reduced. Presiding Officer, understandably, many older folk are now near their wits' end. Now, Age Scotland is warning that another lockdown will be extremely difficult for older people to endure, and that winter action plan will be needed to make sure they can access food, medicines and treatments needed to get through these latest measures. So will the Minister commit to delivering these provisions in a winter plan for our older people as they face the challenges these restrictions bring in the weeks ahead?
Christina McKelvey.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Officer, and thanks for the question. I've seen the Age Scotland report that Tom Mason references there, and all of the challenges that come along with that. Age Scotland is one of our key partners on the National Implementation Group on Social Isolation and Loneliness, so you'll not be surprised that we've been working very closely together. And as well as the national helpline detailed in my opening response to the first question, we also have a national helpline run by Age Scotland, funded by the Scottish Government to the tune of almost £1 million now. As I say, we're working very closely with the National Implementation Group. We're also working very closely with our Older People Strategic Action Forum, who come back and forward to us very regularly with some intelligence and issues and challenges, and also actually very good ideas about what's happening out there on the ground. There's a number of areas where we're working across all of these sectors, whether it's access to food, pharmacy, volunteers, the whole thing there, in order to support older people in lockdown. We know these restrictions have been absolutely terrible for especially older people, and especially older people who don't have a support network around them. That's why we have the national helpline, and that's why we're working so closely with Age Scotland, and I'll be keen to update Tom Mason on any other aspects of that if he wants to come back to me on it. The other thing is, we do have a winter plan in place. We did announce it just before Christmas. It's funded to the tune of £100 million, with a huge proportion of that going to support older people to remain connected and to ensure that those connections are sustainable going forward too. And I'll look forward maybe to speaking to Tom Mason on some of the details of that too.
Thank you. Question 4, Christine Graham.
Officer to ask the Scottish Government what support it will provide to assist older people in coping with the January COVID-19 lockdown restrictions.
Minister.
Thank you very much again, Presiding Officer. This feeds very nicely into the question from Tom Mason just there. The winter, as we realise, it will be particularly difficult for older people. Lockdown restrictions, as we know, are necessary, but they're also very, very hard. And as outlined in the previous answers, we have a range of support in place to help manage all of those aspects. I, as I said earlier, will continue to work alongside our Older People Strategic Action Forum, who are absolutely determined to come up with the ideas that best meet their needs. So working very closely with people affected. I'm really pleased to say that over £1.3 million of funding has been provided to allow them to react, reach out and support their networks. And we will continue to update and publish guidance on available support to help people overcome challenges in accessing and affording food and other essentials for individuals who cannot get help from others. And I'd strongly encourage them to call the National Helpline again. That's a really key point of contact that I would hope other members would ensure they share with their local networks too.
Christine Graham.
Well, I thank the Minister for a response. This dreadful virus has made it necessary for elderly people to access the internet for essentials and, perhaps more importantly, human contact. And I therefore commend Outside the Box in my constituency, providing elderly people with tablets, a 24GB pay-as-you-go data SIM card, giving access to that internet with individualised support called Digital Buddies, a project I believe the Minister is visiting next week. Does she agree with me that this is a project which could do with being replicated in Scotland? Now that I hear the chink of money, that £1.something million, would there be any money available to put this out somewhere else in Scotland?
Minister.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to say that I am meeting Outside the Box and the Digital Buddies on the 19th of January. I'm really looking forward to meeting with them as well. And Christine Graham touched on the Connecting Scotland programme that we've got and the work that we're doing there. Digital Buddies and her constituents are not the only ones who are taking this forward, so there is a lot of work being done. But can I just make a wee point about Outside the Box? Because Anne and Christine from Outside the Box have ensured that their group of older people have embraced getting online. It can sometimes be a bit scary for people. The Buddy scheme has allowed practical support to be delivered despite the restrictions on meeting people. And you know, if you don't mind, Presiding Officer, I want to read very quickly a couple of quotes from people who have taken part in it. One person said, "It's been amazing. I haven't been able to see my grandsons much for the last 9 months. Now we video call every week. I just love it." The other one is, "I haven't been able to go to the community council meetings since lockdown started, and it was great to be able to take part again." And the final one is, "My sister lives in America. With help from my digital buddy, we had a video call, and it was the first time I'd seen her in 10 years. It was brilliant and very emotional." I don't think any of us can say that evidence of that transformational change has been absolutely brilliant. So my thanks go to Outside the Box. I'll be looking forward to seeing them next week. And as Christine Graham knows, the Older People Strategic Action Forum, the members of that, will certainly keep me on my toes, but I'm certainly looking forward to continuing with that work.
Thanks. And a supplementary on this from Shona Robertson.
Thank you. Since the start of the pandemic, the Scottish Government have invested £350 million to help communities through the public health crisis, allowing charities such as Food Train to help older people access food during the pandemic. Can the Minister give an indication of how many older people have been supported by Food Train?
Yeah, Food Train is a smashing organisation, and we've worked with them in the past about malnutrition in older people and making sure that older people are well nourished. But Food Train have been provided with £314,000 since the onset of the pandemic to support older people with meals and shopping services, and they run a number of programmes and have on average have supported the number that Shona Robinson is looking for, 3,500 older people a month, and I think that's great testament to the work that they do.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We might have to have slightly more succinct contributions to get through all the questions, but question number 2, James Kelly.
Also, to ask the Scottish Government what action is taking to protect older people in Glasgow from the impact of COVID-19.
Minister Christina McKelvey.
Presiding Officer, our focus throughout has been to protect people across Scotland and in Glasgow, obviously, as well in James Kelly's region. We have a large range of advice, information and resources on how you can stay safe, get help and give help to others during the coronavirus pandemic through our Ready Scotland website. And we've provided advice for mental health through our Clear Your Head campaign, as well as, of course, the specific advice on keeping people safe via the Facts campaign. People who are required to self-isolate have access to information and support via the National Helpline, connected to local authorities, who have been provided with wider funding of about £350 million to support work directly in communities. Vaccinations, of course, which brings us all a bit of hope, are now being rolled out in residents and care homes for older adults and their carers. People for over the age of 80 and frontline health and social care workers remain a top priority.
James Kelly.
Thank the Minister for that answer. I'm very concerned about the situation of loneliness amongst pensioners in Glasgow. Many pensioners are cut off from their families, are unable to leave their home, and they don't have access to their normal support networks like local pensioners clubs. And this is resulting for some pensioners in a desperate situation where they're not only suffering loneliness but also depression. So can I ask the Minister what action has been taken to identify older people who are potentially in this vulnerable situation, and what action has been taken to follow up on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, thanks, Presiding Officer. It's a really important question because obviously we know of all the groups and the organisations that we're involved in, but it's making contact with people that are maybe not involved in those groups and organisations. And that's why a lot of our media campaigns and the work that we do to ensure that people get the right information and support that they need. We need everybody to take forward that information and support. And if James Kelly's got particular constituents who need that information, we'd be happy to provide that too. Loneliness is an incredibly serious issue. One of the things that we have done with the Older People Strategic Action Forum is to fund them to go online and be digital and make those connections, both to make them, sustain them and carry people through the pandemic. So there's many aspects of the work that the Older People's Forum have been doing that make those connections, identify those people. The most important part is the people who need to be identified, who need that support, especially if they've not got support structures. And many of the groups are doing just that. And that's the intelligence that I get back almost on a weekly basis of the areas and the people that they're now contacting and the areas that maybe we need to focus on. So we're always moving and we're always refining and we're always updating, you know, the work that we're doing. But if there's anything specific in Mr. Kelly's constituency-wise that he thinks that we should be focusing on, I'm really happy to hear it, because I think we've all got a responsibility to make sure we work together on this one.
Thank you. And question 3, Rachel Hamilton.
Ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure that older people who are shielding receive appropriate support.
Minister Christina McKelvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We've made a £15 million fund, a flexible fund available to local authorities at protection level 4 to strengthen their local responses to supporting the needs of people who don't have support networks, including those on the shielding list. Older people and disabled people. Anyone who needs advice or support can call the National Assistance Helpline. I can't overstate how important this is. I hope everybody puts it on both their social media and any other way they have to advertise that helpline. This connects to local authorities who can provide practical and emotional support, including accessing food and other items. In December, we sent everyone on the shielding list a booklet providing advice and information on support that is available. And this is especially important for people with less digital access to information and helpline numbers. It also targets that group that James Kelly just spoken about there, who maybe not digitally connected. So having the booklet through the door, I know from the feedback I've had from my OPSAF group that was a real benefit.
Rachel Hamilton.
I thank the Minister for that answer. We know the toll of the virus has taken a substantial toll on the older population in Scotland, and the mental and physical health impacts have been well documented. Presiding Officer Christine McKelvey confirmed that the SNP's Connected Scotland programme targets just 5,000 older and disabled people, and considering the Scottish Government's own household survey in 2019 showed that there were around about 123,000 over 65s living with no home internet. Will the Scottish Government commit now to increasing the number of older and disabled people supported by this programme? And can she confirm today if work on its Connecting Scotland strategy, which had been paused in the spring, has now restarted?
Minister, as briefly as possible, Minister.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in there, Presiding Officer. It's not just 5,000 people supported by the Connecting Scotland, it's 5,000 older people, and we have 9,000 other individuals who are at high risk or clinical risk, including older people from COVID-19. So that programme is expanding and developing all the time, but it's not just 5,000, it's much, much more than that, and happy to give Rachel Hamilton some update on that. The Connecting Scotland strategy, and the other question that Rachel Hamilton asked there, was we paused the work on the details of the strategy, but we did not actually pause the work of delivering on it, and that's why the National Implementation Group have been key partners in ensuring that all of the actions that we've taken to ensure that anybody who's social isolated and lonely gets the support they need, and that's why that funding has been delivered through those key partners.
Thanks very much. And a brief supplementary from Bill Kidd.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Just to say, I've listened to what's been said. Can the Minister, though, confirm that an older person who's on the shielding list can sign up for priority access to supermarket online delivery slots, as was the case in the first lockdown?
Yeah, we have offered we've offered everyone on the shielding list access to online supermarket priority slots, and this offer remains open. So again, if members could share that. In December, we sent everyone on the shielding list that booklet I spoke about earlier, entitled Balancing the Risk of Daily Activities and Additional Advice on How to Sign Up for Priority Online Supermarket Delivery Slots. The Chief Medical Officer also reminded everyone in his letter of the 5th of January about signing up, and these communications also provided advice to contact the National Helpline again for anyone who needed to sign up. So again, I would appeal to members to make sure that they get that message out to their constituents.
Thank you very much. Question 5, Linda Fabiani.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what issues regarding universal credit have been raised in recent discussions or correspondence with the UK Government.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The Scottish Government has written to the UK Government on 8 occasions during the pandemic with calls to address the myriad of issues that affect universal credit. Now, I've had calls with UK ministerial counterparts throughout the same period to reiterate those issues. We have repeatedly urged the UK Government to confirm that they will make the £20 per week uplift to universal credit and working tax credit permanent, while also extending it to legacy benefits too. We have also called for urgent fixes, including offering non-repayable grants for new applicants and scrapping previous policies such as the benefit cap, the bedroom tax and the two-child limit. We will continue to urge the UK Government to make universal credit a system that works for people and not against them.
Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I inform the Cabinet Secretary that despite the recent ruling of what's come to be known as the Johnson case, supported by the Child Poverty Action Group, the Department of Work and Pensions are continuing with the practice of penalising workers who are paid for weekly because they're paid twice within the one assessment period. There's also the issue of monthly paid employees being paid early, perhaps because of the weekend or a public holiday, and they face the same situation. I have previously written to the appropriate UK Government ministers about this, but I've had no satisfactory response which protects constituents. Will the Cabinet Secretary please add this issue to the list of many issues for discussion with the appropriate ministers and the DWP at the first opportunity?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I certainly would give Linda Fabiani my reassurance that I would absolutely do that, as I share her concerns around this issue very much. I do agree with the High Court judgment that treating claimants who are paid on something other than a monthly basis is terribly inflexible and very unfair. It does lead to an imposition of a benefit cap in effect. And I quote from that ruling that this is an approach that no reasonable Secretary of State would have taken. Driving off to the last year, the number of households in Scotland subject to the benefit cap nearly doubled, 6,400, and 97% of those households had children. The UK government really does need to urgently fix, as Linda Fabiani said, a myriad of issues with universal credit, but she is quite right to point out to this concerning issue, and I would urge the DWP to look at this very seriously. As I said, I'd be more than happy to once again reiterate my concerns on this and other issues with universal credit to the DWP.
Thank you. Question 6, Alistair Allen.
To ask the Scottish Government what is being done to tackle loneliness and social isolation resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister Christina McKelvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I know that the new tougher restrictions are hard, and we're all very well aware of the social harms of social isolation and loneliness. We've spoken a lot about it just this afternoon. That's why, as part of our £100 million winter funding package, we have invested nearly £6 million in promoting equality and tackling social isolation and loneliness. This includes £4.3 million additional funding for our Connecting Scotland programme, specifically to get an additional 5,000 older and disabled people online, as well as funding befriending helplines. For example, Age Scotland Helpline, which has now received over £1 million since the start of the pandemic, has been expanded to meet all of that need.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Minister for that reply. Can the Minister confirm, as I'm sure she will, that there are particular dangers of loneliness amongst those who do not have access to a car in rural areas, where public transport is limited at the best of times and now maybe non-existent? So what is being done to reach out to people who find themselves in that specific situation?
Yes.
Yeah, as part of our £5.91 million winter support package, Befriending Network Scotland has been awarded £100,000 for a small grant scheme of up to £5,000 to tackle loneliness and isolation. Grants will be balanced across rural and urban locations, as well as age and specific groups. So we're very well aware of that rural aspect. We know from the Scottish Household Survey that those in the 16 to 24 age group are most likely to report experiences of isolation and loneliness, and our evidence base suggests some groups within that can be particularly at risk, like young mums. That's why we have funded YouthLink, who already have a current role in distributing grant funding to a range of youth work organisations already working on the ground. £150,000 to administer a grant scheme to help young people across Scotland communicate, including rural and island communities specifically, to get the support that they need now.
Thank you. Question 7, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government how Best Start Foods has supported children and families who are living on a low income.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Best Start Food scheme provides direct financial support to low-income families on certain benefits to ensure that healthy foods are part of the family's diet. We're building a system in Scotland that treats people with dignity, fairness and respect. The devolved Best Start Food scheme has ended the stigma associated with the UK paper voucher system by replacing it with a payment card which can be used like a regular debit card. The scheme has increased the level of payment to provide recipients, offers more choice by including a wider range of foods for families to purchase, and increased access to a wider range of retailers. We have seen an uptake in the scheme increase to around 75% in 2019-20, compared to 58% for Healthy Start vouchers, and we've invested £11.7 million since August 2019, ensuring children and families have access to healthy foods through the Best Start Food scheme.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It's been a clear success, but that said, I've been working with Glasgow North Baby Food Bank to try and end double delivery charges by supermarkets for families using Best Start Foods. I welcome that following my representation, Social Security Scotland are in discussions with supermarkets to try and remove additional online service charges for these families, often imposed due to the low value of an online order. I also welcome that during those discussions both Tesco and Iceland have developed offers and discounts for families using Best Start Foods, but these may need to be better advertised in the future. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that it would be a hugely positive step if supermarket chains across Scotland eliminated double delivery charges, as well as offering a range of discounted or free products for families in receipt of Best Start Foods?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do recognise the issue that Bob Doris has raised today, and thank him for bringing it to my attention once again. This is something, when it comes to delivery charges, that we will continue our engagement with retailers on in an attempt to find potential solutions wherever possible. His discussion also around the fact that certain supermarkets have also been offering special deals to those that have been on Best Start foods, it is particularly welcome. This is obviously fundamentally a choice for the retailers themselves, but I would say that this has been a welcome assistance to those in receipt of Best Start foods, particularly at this most difficult time. Would encourage other retailers to look at this scheme, would encourage the retailers that do have them to perhaps extend them, particularly as this crisis is ongoing. But thank them very much for looking at what can be done to assist people at this time.
Thank you. And if we're very brief, can we try and squeeze in the last question from Dean Lockhart?
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to help alleviate loneliness in older people during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister Christina McKelvey.
Presiding Officer, Dean Locke will not be surprised to realise that my previous answers have answered a lot of that question, including the funding of both 15 and 40 million, the access to the helpline, and working alongside our Older People Strategic Action Forum. Again, hopefully that's responded to the questions that Dean Locke has got, and I look forward to what his supplementary is now.
Dean Lockhart.
Yes, thank you, Minister, for that response. Very briefly, one of the activities older people can do to alleviate loneliness is to meet a family member or a friend outside. However, in recent weeks, because of winter conditions, some of the pathways and walkways have become more dangerous for older people, and that situation has been made worse by the failure of local authorities to clear pathways and walkways for older people. So would the Minister join me in calling for local authorities to do more to make pathways and walkways safer for older people in winter conditions?
Minister.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. Quickly, obviously, that's a responsibility for local authorities, but I'm always happy to support our local authorities to do what they need to do to make areas safe. It's not for me to dictate that to them, but I recognise the issue that Dean Lockhart raises here, and I know that a number of our partners in the OPSAF group have raised this issue too. Thank you.
Thank you to ministers and to colleagues there for squeezing all the questions in again. Now that concludes the first portfolio. I'm going to hand to my fellow presiding officer, Lewis MacDonald, to chair the next session, which is on finance. So over to you, Lewis MacDonald.
Thank you very much. And the next portfolio, as the presiding officer has said, is finance. I remind members that they should enter an R in the chat function if they wish to ask a supplementary question. I'll go directly to question 1, Jamie Green.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many businesses have received support funding from the £185 million package as announced by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance on the 9th of December.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, for context, I'm sure Jamie Green knows this, but we've allocated just over £3 billion to businesses since the beginning of the pandemic, and that is over a third of overall COVID spend, with the vast majority paid out to businesses already. In terms of his question, obviously things have changed in terms of the current restrictions on business, and so right now just under 50,000 businesses can currently apply to the Open Strategic Framework Business Fund to receive the recurring 4 weekly grants, which will be paid in January, and those are administered by local authorities. The December payment was made early, over a week early, before Christmas, and we're on track to make the January payment on time as well. And I remind the Chamber that all eligible businesses forced to close can apply right now, and that is clearly a vast swathe of the business community. Most of them will also get a top-up of up to £25,000, also paid in January, which is obviously considerably more generous than the top-up which was announced in the December statement. And businesses can also apply right now for that grant. But to reduce the administrative burden for both businesses and local authorities, we have streamlined those schemes, and both payments will be made in one go in January.
Jamie Green.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? It was very lengthy, but unfortunately it didn't answer my question. My question was how much the £185 million that was announced on the 9th of January has actually been paid out to businesses. Presiding Officer, we're halfway through January. and these businesses are going to the wall. Jobs are being lost on a daily basis. It's not good enough to make top-line promises that aren't delivering quickly enough on the ground. So I'm going to ask again the Cabinet Secretary, could you explain how much of that fund has been physically delivered to real businesses in cash on the ground? And if she doesn't know the answer to that, will she instead commit to researching that and gathering that data from our local authorities and publishing it and reporting it on a weekly basis so we know that the businesses are getting the money that is announced, these top-level announcements?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank the member, and if I could humbly suggest that he does his research also in terms of gathering the facts, because businesses require information right now and not misinformation. In terms of the data on payments that were made in December will be published imminently. And in terms of businesses that can receive support, in my first answer, I told him that just under 50,000 businesses can currently apply to the Open Strategic Framework Business Fund to receive 4 weekly recurring grants, which will be paid in January. And if he's looking for our track record on that, local authorities paid out the grant in December a week early. In terms of the top-up that has been announced on Monday, the top-up means that a pub or a restaurant with a rateable value up to £15,000, in other words, a small business in Scotland, will receive over £2,500 more this month than the equivalent business under the Tories in England. So I would suggest to him that local authorities are working extremely hard to distribute those grants. They will be paid in January, as we promised, and we recognise the huge pressure on businesses right now.
Supplementary question from Colin Beattie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As part of the £185 million package, the Cabinet Secretary announced that hospitality businesses will receive a very welcome one-off payment of £2,000 to £3,000. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide any detail at this time on how many businesses in Scotland are expected to be eligible for these payments?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Colin Beattie rightly says, in December we announced a one-off payment. That has now been considerably increased to a payment for hospitality of up to £25,000 for larger hospitality business. So that means that a property, take a pub or a restaurant perhaps, with a rateable value of over £51,000 will receive £16,000 more than their equivalents south of the border. We expect tens of thousands of business premises to be eligible for that top-up. That covers retail, hospitality and leisure. And as eligibility is aligned with the strategic framework, businesses only need to make one application. They will receive the 4 weekly recurring grant as well as the top-up on top of that. And in my previous answer, I indicated that a majority of businesses that are applying will receive that top-up.
Further supplementary question, Jackie Bailey.
The additional top-up for hospitality, retail and leisure is of course very welcome indeed. Unfortunately, it appears that the self-catering sector has been missed out, and they are hospitality businesses too. There are hundreds of self-catering businesses in the National Park area, indeed thousands throughout Scotland, in the Cabinet Secretary's constituency as well, and they feel as if they're being treated very unfairly. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, why are there no similar one-off grants for this sector, and will she urgently review the position?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'd like to just correct the record on one point that Jackie Bailey made, and she's quite right to ask about self-catering properties. Can I just stress that self-catering properties are already eligible for the Strategic Framework Business Fund, so all non-domestic rated businesses that are required to close by law, which includes self-catering in level 4 areas, are eligible. So we've not excluded them. To the question she asked about one-off payments though, self-catering is one of the very few sectors that have a bespoke sectoral scheme. Work is at an advanced stage in designing that and making payments. And indeed that will be the second sectoral scheme for self-catering after a previous one was launched last summer. All of us will know that in our mailbags there are many sectors that would themselves like sectoral schemes, and many of them don't have that kind of specific support. So I understand the concerns. We have announced a self-catering specific grant, and we will honour that commitment to deliver a self-catering specific grant.
Question number 2, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much of the Barnett consequentials announced for 2020-21 it is formally allocated.
Cabinet Secretary.
So £8.2 billion of consequentials have been formally allocated to date. So that has been via the summer and the autumn budget revisions, and also as indicated in my letter to the Finance and Constitution Committee on the 8th of December. Since then, just hours before Christmas, a further £400 million of funding was provided in consequentials. That will support a range of costs and already has been distributed to cover the support for further grants made under the strategic framework and the top-up business grants that were announced on January the 11th. Those funds are demand-led, so as the member would appreciate, sufficient funding must be allocated to cover that demand until the end of the financial year. Final allocations will be set out in the spring budget revision.
Liam Kerr.
Yeah, I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but businesses in Aberdeen and the North East are on their knees and desperate to receive the support promised by the Cabinet Secretary. Now, data published yesterday shows only 7 out of 30 funds have even launched, and only £6 million of new funding announced in October has actually reached businesses. Without this money, the businesses can't survive and jobs are going to be lost. Now, as the Cabinet Secretary points out, the SNP has got the money from the UK Government. So, Cabinet Secretary, just what is causing the delay, and when will the SNP get its act together and get businesses in the North East the funds they have been promised?
Cabinet Secretary.
Liam Kerr says data published. I think he might find that that is a Conservative press release, not data, because those figures are not accurate. In terms of support for businesses right now, I remind him of what I said to his colleague Jamie Green and suggest that the Conservatives start distributing information and facts rather than misleading businesses. That includes the fact that the strategic framework, which is the main focus for businesses, that is the main fund available right now. It is live, it is open, payments will be made on a 4-weekly basis. The next payment date is the end of January, and if the payment in December is anything to go by, we will meet that deadline and in fact may try and exceed it.
A brief supplementary, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government recently pledged an additional £4.6 billion to support business across the UK, which included an additional £375 million for Scotland. However, I understand the UK Government has subsequently backtracked on this commitment and suggested Scotland will receive no additional funding at all. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what its latest engagement has been with the UK Government regarding consequentials arising from this announcement?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I wrote to the UK Government in the immediate aftermath of that announcement changing to express my disappointment that the announcement of funding for businesses in England, despite the initial indications, did not actually generate new funding. That's a blow to Scottish businesses, many of whom had been confused by the announcements. And considering the Scottish Tories seem so certain about what funding is available to the Scottish Government, I would have hoped that that situation might have reminded them how fluid the situation is and how complicated it is in terms of funding that is allocated to the Scottish Government. Now, we don't wait for the UK Government to get its act together. We make announcements and get funding out the door, and that's precisely what we're doing with the Strategic Framework Business Fund, the next payment of which will be made at the end of January.
Question number 3, Claire Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much it is allocated to provide financial support for businesses in the Motherwell and Wishaw constituency that have been impacted by Level 4 COVID-19 restrictions.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, I recognise that businesses in the Motherwell and Wishaw constituency have been badly hit by the Level 4 COVID restrictions and will be struggling like businesses across the country. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have allocated almost £3 billion in support for businesses, and grants are obviously provided to local authorities to distribute them to businesses within their area on a demand-led basis. Those funds are live and available for application right now. The details of any funding available through local authorities will be available on the Scottish Government website.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. We know that a number of businesses, for different reasons, have been eligible for the various business support schemes that have been implemented since the start of the pandemic. The Scottish Government has stepped in and announced the Local Authority Discretionary Scheme to allow councils flexibility in awarding financial support. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline what guidance has been given to councils in the formulation of this scheme, and can she give further details on when and how businesses in my constituency may expect to benefit from it?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member. It is a really important issue because we recognise that there are gaps in UK government schemes and indeed in our own schemes, and recognise the challenges that have faced particular businesses that feel they've been excluded from the beginning. And one of the ways in which we have tried to reach them is providing discretionary funding to local authorities. Now, I need to emphasise that that is discretionary by nature, apart from asking that the funding is spent on businesses and that local authorities try and reach those that have not received funding to date. That funding is for local authorities to determine how to distribute. And so guidance has been given to local authorities to that extent. My officials have engaged with North Lanarkshire, and I understand that the details of their scheme, their discretionary scheme, is being considered for approval by the Council's Enterprise and Growth Committee on the 4th of February, with the scheme going live shortly thereafter, and I'm sure the details of the scheme will be published on North Lanarkshire Council's website.
Question 4 is not lodged. Question 5, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government how much it will allocate to support businesses experiencing difficulty due to COVID-19 that do not qualify for current schemes or for which the assistance is inadequate to meet their needs.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, we will continue to do all that we can to support businesses. In addition to the announcement that I made this week about top-up payments in Level 4, I've also announced discretionary payments to island local authorities where businesses are not required by law to close but are seeing reduced custom and reduced trade. And so that additional funding on a one-off basis will help island local authorities support businesses in their areas. That is, of course, in addition to the funding already available through the discretionary fund, the 30 million discretionary fund, and means that support for businesses can be brought up to a level in island communities as those affected by Level 4 restrictions on the mainland. That discretionary fund, as I said to the previous member, is truly discretionary, and it means that it can reach those that have been excluded from current schemes.
Rhoda Grant.
I'm grateful for that, but many island businesses are impacted in exactly the same way as the mainland businesses because they depend on those areas for their trade. Laundries and dry cleaners throughout Scotland have been told to remain open as well because they're an essential service. However, the bulk of their trade is from hospitality, meaning that their business has totally disappeared, and again they don't qualify for assistance. Neither do people who do not pay business rates but have high overheads and they're not covered by support grants. And there'll be many other businesses that don't receive support. Will the Cabinet Secretary look at making support available to all viable businesses who will otherwise fail due to COVID-19?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think Rhoda Grant highlights a number of very important points, and the nature of our business community is complicated, it's complex, and that's why often the schemes available have to be complex by nature in order to reach all these businesses, because single blanket schemes leave some left out. I already answered the point on island communities, where I've made clear that this week we announced funding for our island local authorities in order to help them provide support on a par with businesses in Level 4 areas. But in terms of the other points that she mentioned, I think there's two ways of resolving some of those. The first is the discretionary funding for local authorities across Scotland, which again is up to the discretion of local authorities themselves. And secondly, that is why we have moved into providing sectoral-based grants. Now, I've always said, I said in December, that risks the landscape of grant support becoming quite complicated and complex. But in order to reach the self-employed, in order to reach businesses that don't pay non-domestic rates, in order to reach those that aren't registered in any way in Scotland but who need support. Those sectoral schemes, whether it's for the wedding sector, or for taxi drivers, or for mobile close contacts like beauticians, those sectoral schemes will reach them.
Brief supplementary question, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I raise again the issue of self-catering accommodation providers, which was referred to earlier? The Cabinet Secretary had announced previously a £7 million scheme. Can I ask her firstly, when will this scheme be open for applications? And secondly, given that there are more than 16,000 registered self-catering properties in Scotland, £7 million averages out at just over £400 each. And does she think that is sufficient to compensate the sector for the losses it is suffering?
Cabinet Secretary.
In terms of the answer to that question, the one form of support that Murdo Fraser didn't mention, but which self-catering is also receiving, is the ongoing Strategic Framework Business Fund. So self-catering properties will receive grants of up to £3,000 in January. On top of that, he mentioned the sectoral scheme, and we would hope, I announced in December, that scheme would go live in January, and that still remains the intention. So we are happy to take feedback, as I've heard loud and clear through these questions, but at the moment, all self-catering properties in level 4 areas will get a grant of up to £3,000 in January, and those in our island communities can receive support from the discretionary fund that's been given to our island local authorities.
Now for the brief supplementary, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Following my discussions with the Finance Secretary last week, can I thank her for accepting the case for additional funding to allow businesses in level 3 areas like Orkney access to the same support as that available to level 4 businesses under the strategic fund. However, is she able to allay fears amongst businesses in my constituency by confirming that island councils are free to use top-up funding to support any businesses, including self-catering and B&Bs, that would be eligible for support under the Framework Fund, and that the sector-specific funds that have been announced are in addition and open to businesses both in level 3 and in level 4?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Liam, for that question. We have listened to feedback from people like yourself and others in terms of ensuring that there's support available for those island communities. In terms of answering the specific question, there will be discretionary funding. There is discretionary funding available to local authorities, including island local authorities, to do whatever they want with, as long as it's for businesses and it reaches those that have been excluded. And secondly, in terms of the top-up, my view is that that top-up should mean that businesses in island communities receive the same support on the same level as businesses in level 4 areas. And of course, at the outset, I should have called you Liam MacArthur rather than just Liam.
Very much. Question number 6, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much it has allocated to support the construction and development industry during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, when the pandemic began back in late March, we moved rapidly to put in place a support package to protect businesses, jobs and livelihoods, and that included the Business Support Grant Fund, totalling more than £1 billion, and that included the Small Business Grant Fund, offering grants of up to £10,000 on properties in receipt of certain reliefs. We've also introduced the Pivotal Enterprise Resilience Fund for vulnerable SME firms, which are vital to the local, regional or national economy, and that delivered almost £12 million of support, primarily to the construction sector. We also provided quite separately a £230 million return to work package to stimulate Scotland's economy and give the confidence that our construction industry requires. And so together, that package of support has tried to reach the challenges facing the construction industry.
Brian Whittle.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? But she will be aware in this industry that the workforce is predominantly carried by subcontractors, and they can furlough staff should those staff be uncertain in their ability to come back to work. Now, this often leaves main contractors and developers with the costs of interest payments, site costs and losses if that site has to close. So can I ask what support the Scottish Government can give to those in that situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, it's a good point, and if the member wants to flesh out the specifics of what he's talking about, I'm happy to look at that. But in terms of answering the question on subcontractors, where businesses need support, there may well be support available to them. But secondly, I think what's imperative right now is confidence. He talked about contractors being concerned and worried about their pipeline of work and therefore taking decisions about subcontractors. And I think there's an important role for government to play in terms of providing that confidence. Obviously, there's a budget in 2 weeks' time, and as part of that budget, I intend to set out a pipeline of infrastructure work, not just over the next year, but over the next few years, to give that confidence and hopefully allow construction companies to invest not just in their workforce, but also perhaps to expand it in order to meet the pipeline of work that will be available.
Question number 7, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how much funding it's made available to business throughout the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, since the very early stages of the pandemic, our support for business and the economy now totals almost £3 billion, which is more than a third of total COVID funding, demonstrating our firm commitment to provide as much as possible to directly support affected businesses.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It's important that steps are taken to ensure that demand for business support doesn't outstrip the resources available. However, a lack of fiscal flexibilities limits the action which the Scottish Government can take in this regard. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the UK Government should urgently release reserves to enable the Scottish Government to provide additional support to business?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I thank the member for that question, and I'm assuming she's talking about the fact that the UK Government has announced a £55 billion COVID fund for the coming year, but has only allocated a small amount of that funding. And we have been clear from the outset that this year's COVID funding from the UK Government is welcome, but it doesn't cover all the need. In these questions alone, I have heard calls for additional support for businesses and for different sectors. And it's clear that businesses are facing challenging times. We will use every penny that we can to get it out the door. We also need to make sure that we cover all the costs and the needs between now and the end of the financial year. I'm concerned that at this stage in the financial year, almost halfway through January, we are still awaiting our final funding settlement for 2020-21, and furthermore that the UK Government may well release additional consequentials that they've announced but haven't allocated. And that's why I wrote to the Chancellor this week requesting that that reserve be allocated so that we know what we are planning with, because that would allow us then to fully plan and respond to the crisis now rather than waiting for the delayed UK budget in March.
Thank you. Finally and briefly, please, question number 8, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government whether there's been any update from the UK Government on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and how it will impact on Scotland.
Minister Ivan McKee.
Following the UK's exit from the EU, Scotland is now unable to participate in future EU structural fund programmes. The recent UK spending review provided outline information about the UK's Shared Prosperity Fund and a modest £220 million one-year additional funding programme to cover the entire UK. How these funds will operate in practice, how the Scottish Government will participate in their development are questions which remain unanswered. Based on a like-for-like replacement of previous EU funding support for Scotland, we seek an annual replacement value of £183 million for Scotland from the UK fund. Given this lack of concrete information from the UK Government, we are unable to determine how Scotland will benefit from these funds. However, we are working hard to ensure that Scotland is not shortchanged. We have published our own proposals for the Shared Prosperity Fund and continue to press the UK Government for full devolution of funding to ensure that Scotland's distinctive needs are met.
Colin Beattie.
I thank the Minister for his response. Given the continuing uncertainty in respect to how Scotland's finances will be impacted post-Brexit, how is the Scottish Government proposing to mitigate these risks, and is the UK Government taking any steps to provide reassurance in this regard?
Minister.
We're doing all that we can with the powers we have to mitigate the worst impacts of the UK's exit from the EU. Measures are being taken to protect trade and critical supply chains to reduce the risks of disruption of goods and people crossing borders, and to provide Scottish businesses with the vital advice and information they need to continue to operate effectively. But we are clear that we will not be able to mitigate all of the impacts completely. Any loss of structural fund monies on the scale I have outlined would be very difficult for us to mitigate. The impact on many of Scotland's most fragile communities could be significant, and we should perhaps not be surprised that the Tories are finding new ways to attack the poorest in our society. That's why we will continue to press for full devolution of our fair share of future funding for the lost structural funds to at least be replaced in full, and for there to be no grab by Westminster of our devolved powers in this area. That's what our stakeholders want, and that's what we will keep trying to deliver.
Thank you very much. That concludes questions on finance. I will now return the chair for the next portfolio to the presiding officer.
Thank you very much. And our final portfolio this afternoon is Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform. And I'll just remind members that questions 4, 6 and 8 are grouped, and questions 5 and 7 are grouped together. Now that means if you want a supplementary on any of these questions, they'll come at the end of the grouping. And I think there are quite a lot of members wishing to ask supplementaries today, so I just encourage all members and ministers to be concise in their questions and answers. So we start with question number 1, Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it ensures that marine life is protected in the development of offshore wind farms.
Minister Ben Macpherson.
And here.
Mr. Minister, I'm just going to pause you for a second because your microphone's not on. We're just going to pause a second. You can put your microphone on, and then, Minister, you can try again. Right, in that case, Minister, if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to question 2, and we'll come back to you if that's okay. So I'm going to move to question 2 from David Torrance. David.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports the design of new and innovative projects that can help tackle climate change.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Climate Change Plan update, published in December, sets out a number of measures to support innovation and encourage new technologies and ideas. And this includes £180 million for a new emerging technologies fund, supporting the development of Scottish hydrogen and carbon capture and storage industries, as well as new negative emissions technologies. Innovation happens, of course, at the community level too. Last week I was delighted to announce support of £3.2 million this year for over 270 projects through the Community Climates Asset Fund, providing new and innovative ways for communities across Scotland to contribute to this national endeavour.
David Torrance.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. We have seen many successful community energy projects which have not only provided people with improved energy efficiency options, but have helped to regenerate communities. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what assistance the Scottish Government can give to community groups who are keen to take a proactive role in achieving Scotland's zero carbon goal through community-led renewable energy projects?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've already mentioned the Community Climate Asset Fund. The Scottish Government also continues to support the growth of community and local energy through its Community and Renewable Energy Scheme, CARES. CARES has made over £51 million available since its inception to support over 600 community and locally owned renewable energy projects across Scotland, helping communities to play a part in the transition to net zero. And the next iteration of CARES, which was due to commence on April 1st, is going to focus on decarbonisation, particularly heat decarbonisation, and driving community-led activity.
Thank you. And now I'm hopeful that we've reconnected with Minister Ben Macpherson. Mr Macpherson, the question was about wind farms, development of offshore wind farms from Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Throughout the development process for offshore wind farms in Scottish waters, the Scottish Government manages a delicate balance between delivering our net zero commitment and protecting Scotland's diverse and precious marine environment. Strategic environmental assessments ensure that environmental issues are taken into account at the planning stage and habitats regulations appraisals are undertaken to determine whether a plan or a project will have an adverse effect on the integrity of a protected area. Following this, at the application stage, developers must submit an environmental report identifying potential impacts on marine life, which is subject to rigorous consultation with environmental stakeholders, and ministers are required to consider these impacts when making their determination. Should consent be granted, it is subject to conditions mitigating and monitoring the effects on the environment where necessary, maintaining the important balance between the need to produce clean, green energy and protecting our natural environment.
Mrs. Wishart.
I thank the Minister for that answer. It's estimated that there's over 100,000 tonnes of unexploded munitions in British waters. Many will be on sites in Scotland earmarked for offshore wind farm development. As the ScotLink orca species champion, I'm concerned about the impact of clearing munitions on cetaceans. Detonations and explosions can displace animals and cause permanent hearing loss, and fish breeding grounds can also be impacted. I've had correspondence with the Cabinet Secretary about new disposal technology, low-order deflagration. What progress has been made to bring forward a policy change to make use of the technology to help protect marine life?
Minister.
Thank Beatrice Wishart for a question and the correspondence with the Cabinet Secretary in the autumn. As you'll know, should a UXO require detonation, a European Protected Species Licence will be required for Marine Scotland, and as a deflagration as a method of UXO disposal has potentially significant reduced acoustic impacts compared with other methods. However, for a change in policy to require this technique to be used, such methods must be proven to be commercially viable, and we await considerations around that and would be happy to continue correspondence with the member on these important matters.
Thank you very much. Question number 3, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support flood prevention measures across Lothian.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Our programme for government did commit an extra £150 million for flood risk management, in addition to the £420 million 10-year funding provided to local authorities. We continue to work with SEPA, local authorities and other relevant bodies to deliver the actions detailed in the current flood risk management strategies and plans, and this includes supporting the estimated £42 million Musselburgh Flood Protection Scheme currently at design stage. The next round of strategies and plans will detail the actions prioritised to reduce the risk of flooding to communities in Lothian and elsewhere within the 2022 to 2028 flood risk management cycle.
Miles Briggs.
The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that after torrential rain in early December last year, the River Amond in Kirkliston burst its banks, much to the concern of local residents who faced regular flooding threats and the damage that's caused over many years now. What assessment has been made of additional measures that will be required to protect residents and businesses in Kirkliston? Will the Cabinet Secretary assure local people that the Scottish Government will support any necessary measures going forward? And can I also invite the Cabinet Secretary, if she'll agree, to a site visit with me to see the impact of flooding on the local community in Kirkliston?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not certain about the site visit proposal, Presiding Officer. I need to take advice on that in the current circumstances, but we will certainly liaise with the member about that. In respect of any particular proposal, there needs to be a detailed bit of discussion that takes place, which will include local authorities, and SEPA, and I'm not at all certain how far this process will have begun, will have gone in terms of Kirkliston. I would expect to see if Kirkliston is not already listed as one of the areas that is looking for that is within the plans, that there will be consideration for it, and I undertake to write to the member on that very specific issue, but it would be helpful to have some indication at this point, given the recent nature of the incident that he's talking about, the extent to which there is already consideration and discussion taking place about the inclusion of Kirkliston in future flood risk management proposals.
Thank you. Now, I think I've got a supplementary from Gordon MacDonald on this question. Donald?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A number of areas of my constituency of Edinburgh Pentlands are prone to flooding, in particular parts of Longstone, Kingsnow, Curry and Balerno. What discussions has the Government had with SEPA, Scottish Water and Edinburgh Council on delivering the actions set out in the flood risk management strategies and plans?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we do, of course, engage extensively with SEPA, with Scottish Water and other relevant agencies, including Edinburgh Council, on a wide range of issues to ensure that Scotland is resilient on the challenges of flooding and other climate pressures. National and local working groups provide a forum for discussion on issues, including monitoring progress of the flood risk management strategies and plans. The Scottish Government discussed the strategies and plans at the latest Scots Flood Risk Management Group meeting in November 2020. City of Edinburgh Council and SEPA are both members of this particular group.
Thank you. Now, questions 4, 6 and 8 are grouped together. Question 4, Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made in tackling fly tipping.
Minister Ben Macpherson.
Throughout the pandemic, we have worked closely with COSLA and local authorities to support the reopening and continued safe operation of household waste and recycling centres and essential waste services. Updated Scottish Government guidance explicitly allows people to travel to access essential waste and recycling services, and local authorities are working hard to keep waste collections operating under very difficult circumstances, and I want to pay tribute to all the refuse workers for their hard work in keeping our vital services running, and our thanks to them. I would urge everyone to manage their waste responsibly at this difficult time. Our waste management marketing campaign and web resource, which includes messages on fly tipping prevention, sets out how the public can do this.
Finlay Carson.
I thank the Minister for that response. Since 2015, the inclusion of unauthorised sites within the landfill tax legislation allows Revenue Scotland to charge tax on unauthorised dumping. Information sharing also takes place between Revenue Scotland and SEPA, which allows SEPA intelligence team to share information with Revenue Scotland to determine if unauthorised disposals have been undertaken. The legislation relates to unauthorised disposals, including fly tipping made with or without the agreement or explicit knowledge of the landowner, where the person liable to pay tax is any person who made the disposal or knowingly permitted the disposal. Can the Minister explain why not one penny has been recovered on unauthorised disposals when this government says it is doing everything it can to stop fly tipping?
Minister.
Thank Mr Carson for that important follow-up and the technical detail. Given that the question, his supplementary question covers both this portfolio and the finance portfolio, I would express to him that I will take his question away and consult with finance colleagues and provide him with a written response on the matters raised.
Thank you very much. Claire Baker.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to reduce levels of littering and fly tipping.
Minister Ben Macpherson.
We are working closely with local authorities and COSLA, as I said, to ensure that household waste recycling centres remain open under the current COVID-19 restrictions and to allow the recycling and disposal of waste. Since the beginning of the pandemic, a waste sector forum has been established to bring together key partners in the waste sector to ensure that we are working closely on key issues, including littering and fly tipping. Our national litter strategy, which includes measures on fly tipping, is coming to the end of its 5-year lifespan, and we are reviewing how to best take forward policy in this area. And to that end, this month the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform will be attending a roundtable discussion to hear proposals for further measures to tackle fly tipping from various stakeholders.
And Claire Baker.
Thank you. Can I focus on littering? We are all aware of the importance of using face coverings and face masks in the battle against COVID-19, but we are seeing far too many of them left littering on our streets, our beaches and our countryside, which is presenting a risk particular to wildlife as well as a health risk. Around 30% of Scots are estimated to be using single-use face coverings. So can I ask what the Scottish Government is doing to ensure these are being disposed of correctly and safely, and how it is promoting the use of reusable face coverings?
Minister.
Throughout the period of the pandemic and the changes in regulations to stipulate the wearing of face coverings, there have been a number of initiatives on messaging from national marketing campaigns around how to and when you should wear a face covering, and also encouraging people to use face coverings that can be reused once washed safely, and messaging around that. And of course there has also been messaging with partners on how to dispose both safely and appropriately of single-use face coverings, and I will give an undertaking to keep considering that as an outcome of these questions, and how we continue to put those initiatives forward and the important considerations therein.
Thank you very much. And question 8, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what discussions it is having with local authorities regarding fly tipping.
Minister.
I refer Murdo Fraser to the answers I've given to the previous questions on this subject, and also take the opportunity to firstly reinstate this Government's continued and frequent liaison with the waste sector, including COSLA, throughout the pandemic via our Waste Sector Forum that has met regularly since the start of the pandemic. In addition, I want to extend our continued thanks to our key workers in refuse who are working hard in very difficult circumstances to keep this key service running, and I'm sure I speak for colleagues in that regard.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Minister for his response? At present, local authorities have the power to issue fines in relation to fly tipping, but in practice that power is seldom used because there are procedural issues with it and because of the problems in collecting evidence. Can I ask when the Scottish Government last reviewed the legislation in this area that empowers local authorities to take action, and do they believe it is time to look again at the law in the matter to try and increase the level of prosecution against what is a growing problem?
Minister.
The Scottish Government is always looking at and willing to look at how we can strengthen our approach to littering and fly tipping. We increased the penalties in 2014, but if there are new or additional measures that would provide a further deterrent, then colleagues and I will certainly be willing to consider these. This could also, for example, involve looking at ways we can strengthen the waste carrier regulations. As part of the consideration for the next strategy, I think these are important questions for us all to consider, and certainly the Scottish Government will do so.
We've got a number of supplementaries on this. Not sure how many we'll get in. I'll try Colin Beattie first.
What preparation is being undertaken to ensure that our waste sector can continue to operate during this second national lockdown, which is so important to us in stopping the spread of COVID, protecting our NHS and saving lives?
Minister.
Well, waste collection is an essential service. And as I said, we are really grateful to those who are working to keep such services going in our communities across Scotland. During this national crisis, we continue to proactively work with COSLA, local authorities, SEPA, Zero Waste Scotland, and the waste sector as a whole in order to understand the overall resilience of disposal and collection arrangements and explore solutions where challenges are identified. This includes working with the waste sector to share best practice from the first lockdown and other sectors that have faced similar issues. And in partnership with Zero Waste Scotland, COSLA and SEPA, we're extending the programme of our national communications through the Managing Our Waste campaign to support households and industry to manage waste effectively during this second national lockdown period.
And Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On the topic of fly tipping and littering, I wonder if the Minister could update Chamber on progress and plans for banning harmful single-use plastics as part of the Scottish Government's intention to build a circular economy.
Minister.
Yes, certainly the Scottish Government, as members will know, has committed to meet or exceed the standards set out in the European Union's Single-Use Plastic Directive, and we remain committed to long-term initiatives to tackle our throwaway culture and encourage a circular economy. The consultation is seeking views on proposals to ban single-use plastic straws, stirrers, cutlery, plates, balloon sticks and expandable polystyrene food containers was published on the 12th of October 2020 and closed on the 4th of January this year. We are currently analysing responses ahead of preparing draft regulations, and the proposed introduction of market restrictions forms part of a package of wider measures being taken forward to address marine litter and support a shift away from a throwaway culture.
Thank you very much for that. Question number 5, Anas Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on preparations for COP26, scheduled to take place in Glasgow in November.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
We are, of course, delighted to be hosting COP26 and look forward to the opportunity to demonstrate Scotland's world-leading climate action as the eyes of the world do turn to Glasgow. My officials continue to support planning preparations for delivery of a safe, secure and successful COP26 and are working with partners to ensure this. This includes recent involvement in a safety and security risk assessment and the creation of a planning group to provide Scottish public health advice and support the UK Government in ensuring the already postponed event can safely operate within a COVID-19 environment.
Anas Sarwar.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Of course, it's an important opportunity to demonstrate global leadership, but also an important economic opportunity for the city of Glasgow. Given the restrictions put in place by the pandemic, is there contingency plans in place if there has to be a scaled back or indeed cancelled COP26 conference? And if that was to be the case, how early would the government make that decision and communicate that with stakeholders in Glasgow?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I know that Anas Sarwar will recognise that the situation is incredibly fluid with the pandemic. What we are currently preparing for is a COP26 in November, as previously desired. I would have anticipated that as a result of what has happened, even proceeding on that basis will probably involve a great deal more virtual work than perhaps would have been the case in previous COPs. The extent to which that may become an even greater component is very difficult to gauge at this point, and it is something which is being kept under constant review. At the moment, we don't have a fixed deadline by which decisions would have to be made, and in any case, for very obvious reasons, that is not a decision that would be made simply by the Scottish Government deciding it. It would be something that would require to be done in collaboration with the UK Government and other agencies, not least of which would be the United Nations. So it's a slightly more complex matter than it might initially appear.
And this is grouped with question 7, Stuart Stevenson.
To ask the Scottish Government what preparations it is making for its participation in COP26.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, beyond the operational readiness that I set out already in response to Anas Sarwar, we are taking action across the board to prepare for COP26 around our agreed themes of just transition and people. We've recently published a draft public engagement strategy and are partnering with Glasgow Science Centre on a community engagement programme. We were honoured with appointment as co-chair of the Under 2 Coalition and are using this to drive momentum and ambition globally. We will also be taking the novel approach of publishing Scotland's contribution to the Paris Agreement and an indicative NDC shortly, focusing on Scotland's world-leading targets and summarising our plans to reduce emissions and adapt to climate change.
Stuart Stevenson. Stuart Stevenson.
At previous COPs, Scottish ministers have been a formal part of the UK delegation. Indeed, I was on more than one occasion. Is this expected to be the case at COP26?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, and I have been a formal part of the UK delegation in each year since I was appointed to this job. We have been consistently represented at the COP since 2009, and we do expect this to be the case at COP26. And of course, as I've already referenced, we will demonstrate our leadership role at COP26 when, as co-chair of the Under 2 Coalition, we will drive momentum and climate ambition on the global stage.
Thank you, and apologies to members. I think we've really run out of time there to squeeze any more questions on us. We have to move on to other business. So thank you to Cabinet Secretary, Minister and members.